On October 1st, 1993, Polly Hannah Klaas, a resident of 4th Street in Petaluma, California, along with female two friends, were participating in a time-honored tradition amongst preteens, the sleepover. What should have been a safe night turned to chaos when a man broke into the house wielding a knife while Polly's mother slept. Unbeknownst to Polly and her friends, the man stood outside of her bedroom door, listening to the three girls as they enjoyed their last moments of innocent fun. Between 10:30 and 11 p.m., when Polly opened her door to get more supplies for the party, all three girls saw a tall, dark figure standing in the doorway, knife and duffel bag in hand. As the man walked into the room, the girls fixated on the long knife with a wooden handle, which he threatened them with and asked, "Who lives here?" To which Polly replies, "I do." The intruder's knife kept the girls quiet as he used strips of fabric and Nintendo cords to bind their wrists and ankles. After binding all three terrified girls by the hands and feet and putting pillowcases on their heads, he told the two girls to count to 1,000 as he took Polly, who was sobbing, and forced her into his car. The girls waited until they heard the closing of the front screen door and then frantically began trying desperately to untie themselves by standing back to back and fumbling at each other's bindings. But when that didn't work, one girl was able to bring her hand underneath her legs and step through the ties around her arms, bringing her hands to the front and enabling her to untie herself, and then the other girl. Once free, the two ran to Polly's mother's room, where she was awakened by screams of "Polly's gone," and the mother, Eve Nichols, promptly called the police at 11:03. During questioning, the lead officer in charge had to briefly consider that the girls were making this whole story up as some type of elaborate teenage prank. But the girls' vehemence and raw panic convinced him otherwise. The FBI was quickly called to help investigate, and the Petaluma Police Department sent out an alert to all surrounding departments. Upon canvassing, a neighbor told police that around 10:30 that night, a man nonchalantly walked up the driveway and casually opened the front door. The way in which the man's movements seemed so relaxed and at home, the neighbor had assumed he was someone who either was staying at the house or knew the family and had not raised any sort of alarm. Little did the neighbor know that he witnessed Polly's abductor right before her kidnapping. Because of the casual manner in which the neighbor remembered the man walking into the house, police briefly considered whether or not it had been Polly's father who had taken her. Polly's parents were divorced, and because most child abductions involve someone close to the child, police briefly considered the father, Mark Klaas, who lived in neighboring Sausalito, as a suspect, but after more investigation and the administration of a polygraph test, he was cleared of any suspicion, and the investigation focused on a stranger abduction, which statistically did not bode well for Polly, as 75% of stranger abductions end in murder. Upon careful and tedious crime scene analysis, they find a palm print on the bunk bed frame in Polly's room. The palm print is not a match to any family members or visitors in the home. Unlike fingerprints, there was no database for palm prints, so the function of the print would only serve to match to an existing suspect. While police were analyzing the crime scene for any details, investigators were diligently interviewing the two young witnesses to Polly's kidnapping. They utilized a sketch artist to draw what the girls remembered about the man. The girls recalled he was white, had a yellow bandana around his head, and had facial hair. Thanks to the avant-garde techniques of two concerned and computer-literate Petaluma residents, Gary French and Bill Rhodes, along with journalist Larry McGidd, Polly's case was the first missing persons case to utilize the internet as a means of spreading awareness. Although the World Wide Web was very much in its infancy, the missing poster was shared with those savvy enough to be online in 1993 and was downloaded not only in numerous states through the U.S., but also countries across the world, making Polly's case the first missing child's case to go viral. In all, Polly's image was shared digitally more than 2 billion times. Besides the internet, more classic methods of raising awareness and cultivating resources was used, such as the posting of flyers around town, passing out pre-recorded tapes playing the information, the faxing of flyers to local stores and supermarkets for distribution, passing out of F-shirts, and even the stuffing of flyers into the bottoms of the boxes of Bio Bottoms kids' clothes, of which Polly's mother was a sales manager. Over 8 million pieces of paper, printed with Polly's picture and information, were dispersed across the world, places as far-flung as Kathmandu. The general hope of the almost 4,000 volunteers was that high visibility meant she and her abductor couldn't travel freely. But as it turned out, the culprit and his innocent had been in Petaluma's backyard the entire time. 4,000 volunteers assisted in the search for Polly, covering over 1,000 miles of fields, meadows, apple orchards, and redwood preserves. Additionally, air support was brought in and searched 3,000 square miles of land for any signs of a girl who was now on the forefront of everyone's minds. The Petaluma community came together and created the Polly Klaas Search Center, a one-stop shop that would enable the volunteers to organize and methodically spread the word. This unified system of volunteers, the media, the community members, and the families of victims working in tandem helped to form a model of how missing children's searches should be enacted, instead of the disjointed manner in which they were conducted in 1993. The Polly Klaas Search Center eventually would field calls from other parents of missing children and would assist in the ensuing search and media blitz needed to find a missing child. Winona Ryder, a well-known film actress who was originally from Petaluma, offered a $200,000 reward for any information that successfully helped bring Klaas home. Then one day, there is seemingly a break in the case. Mark Klaas's brother-in-law was watching the home of Polly's father when a call came in. The voice on the other end of the line was purporting to be Polly and claimed that she was being held in a hotel room. The voice claimed that someone was keeping her there and they had stepped out but would be back soon. Then the line disconnected. Frantic, Polly's uncle calls police, who quickly mobilized to put a tap on the phone. Soon, another call, similar to the first, comes in. It is traced to Hayward, a city close by in the East Bay. But when police arrive at the trace location, they find it to be not a hotel, but a middle-class home with a teenage girl living in it. She claimed to have been dared to make these prank phone calls, and family members were devastated to learn it all been a sick hoax. 3 weeks after the abduction, on October 19th, police get a call from a man claiming to have Polly and asking for ransom money. Police phones being automatically tapped, authorities were able to get to the offender's home almost instantly, but soon found it was just another hoax, this one born not of a teenage prank, but very adult greed and stupidity. The man had hoped to extort money from the police without much forethought into the process, and he was swiftly arrested. Soon after, Vallejo police contacted Petaluma police with a potential suspect. He was caught breaking into the home of a single mother of a 12-year-old girl and had with him a knife and what they called a rape kit. He became a central suspect due to the similarities in circumstances, but no evidence was able to link him to the crime. In the course of the investigation, Petaluma PD received a tip that Polly might be held at a cabin deep in the woods in Northern California. The Petaluma PD went to a cabin in Mendocino County on a tip from an FBI informant who claimed Polly was being held by drug dealers in some sort of revenge kidnapping. But as SWAT teams descended upon the cabin in the dead of night, the head of the Petaluma Police Department Task Force received a call from the FBI agent in charge of handling the confidential informant and was told that the entire thing was made up. The mission was aborted and the police were back at square one. Then, on November 28th, finally, After so many false leads and false hope, Dana Jaffe, a woman who had previously called police about a suspicious man on her property the night of Polly's kidnapping and who lived on Pythian Road in Santa Rosa, about 25 miles north of Petaluma, called police for the second time in 2 months. This time, she was walking around her property after loggers had cleared some trees of hers when she came upon a collection of items which raised her suspicions. They were bindings looks like they had been used to tie someone up. Police dispatch sent out Detective Larry Pelton, who had been present in the bedroom crime scene of the kidnapping, was called to investigate the Jaffe property. He discovered strips of white cloth which he instantly recognized as matching the cloth the 2 remaining girls were tied up with. This discovery prompted police to look further into Dana's prior call to police, which had come in the same night as the kidnapping, almost 2 months before. On October 2nd, at around 12 midnight, about an hour after the abduction of Polly, a resident of Oakmont Village in Santa Rosa, a town about 25 miles from Petaluma, had just come home from work and relieved her nanny of her duties. Dana Jaffe's nanny was leaving the home for the night when she saw a strange man standing on the private road that leads to the Jaffe house, on the inside of the fenced-off property. Terrified, she quickly drives to a nearby gas station and calls Dana to tell her that a scary man is on the inside perimeter of her property and to get out. Dana throws both kids into the car and drives off the property to call police in safety. When the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department responded to Dana's call, they found a man named Richard Allen Davis standing next to his rusty Ford Pinto, which had run off into a ditch. Davis was sweaty, short of breath, and had leaves and twigs in his hair. Deputies were unable to see the resemblance to the fact that Davis matched the description of the kidnapper as described on the teletype because they never even heard the broadcast, as it wasn't shared with their individual radios by the Sheriff's Department. Davis claimed he was merely sightseeing and had gotten lost and distracted and run into the ditch. The officers bought the story after running his name and seeing no outstanding warrants and briefly searching his car. The officers were not even aware that a neighboring county was on the search of a 12-year-old kidnapping victim because they were on a different radio system. In 1993, there was no such thing as an Amber Alert, so the officers had no way of knowing of the emerging case. Based on the evidence, it is supposed that by the time Davis was being questioned by police next to his car, Polly was already dead, and Richard was coming back to collect her body, but had broken down prior to reaching his goal. Because of the lack of cross-county communication, the officers had no reason to check the priors, or they would have realized they were talking to a suspicious man who had been convicted of kidnapping twice before. Davis was let go after the property owner decided not to press charges. His car was towed. Police made the man swear to never go on her property again and then released him. Upon finding the torn fabric and torn ballet tights that matched items from Polly's room, police revisited the call made the night of October 2nd and found the name and driver's license photo of the man stopped that night. The resemblance of Richard Allen Davis's features to that of the sketch provided by Polly's friends was noticeable almost instantly. Richard Allen Davis, who had been convicted of kidnapping twice before, had actually been in the presence and in the hands of police twice before, in the 2-month-long search for Polly, once when they stopped him while on Jaffe's property, and a second time a few weeks later, on October 19th. On October 19th, Davis was pulled over in Ukiah and arrested for driving under the influence. He was booked into the county jail, where they had the police sketches of the suspected kidnapper on the actual walls of the jail, but no one noticed the resemblance of questioned Davis's past crimes. In 1976, Davis kidnapped a woman and sexually assisted her. He claimed he was hearing voices and had heard the disembodied voice of a dead girlfriend postulating on what it was like to be raped. He served 5 years for this crime. Then, in 1984, he abducted another woman and stole $6,000 from her. He served 8 years for this second felony and was paroled in June of 1993, just 4 months before Polly was abducted. Upon realizing the connection, police began intense surveillance of Davis. After surveilling him for 2 days and finding no new evidence, they decided to move in and arrest him. Police went to the home of Davis's sister in Ukiah, where, after questioning the sister and searching the home for Polly, they set up a perimeter and ended up catching Richard as we tried to get back into the property. A low-key and calm arrest was made, but Richard insisted he knew nothing about Polly. However, after obtaining a copy of his handprints, Crime Lab was able to say that palm print left at the scene of the crime was matched to that of Richard Davis, and police breathe a sigh of relief as they finally are given a break in the case. However, their relief was short-lived, because even though the palm print left conclusively proved Richard's presence, the police couldn't feel any joy until they found Polly. Initially, Richard insisted that the police had no proof that he had ever been in Polly's house and denied any knowledge of the crime, but when presented with the copy of the palm print analysis, he quickly changed his story and confessed. It is in his confession that police learn that their worst fears have been confirmed. Polly was killed. 4 days after his arrest, and after an exhaustive search of the scene on Pythian Road and the property, which spanned for 4 days, Richard finally confessed to strangling Polly the night of the 1st and eventually led police to Polly's makeshift burial location off of Highway 101 near Cloverdale. Detectives noted that Davis casually smoked a cigarette as he told investigators go towards the right of a fallen tree. There, they would uncover the unrecognizable remains of 12-year-old Polly Klaas, thus ending the search in the most tragic way possible. It turns out that in the early hours of October 2nd, when officers received a call of a strange man trespassing on a private road, Polly was probably already dead. Although Davis would not explain the exact timeline of events based on his limited conversations with police and in conjunction with the evidence, detectives believe that Polly was attacked and killed near Jaffe's property prior to deputies stopping Davis and towing his car. Prosecutors surmised that Davis hid her body in some bushes and then was stopped by police before he could move her to her final resting place, a grave location police believe he had already picked out. Upon hearing the news that Polly had been found deceased, Polly's father, Mark, sat by the fire and simply sobbed. The search was over. The truth was out. Hope was gone. Eve Nichols' mother had kept a candle lit in the window of Polly's home in hopes she would come back, but after hearing the tragic news from officers, she went and gut-wrenchingly blew the candle out. Prosecutors claim this was a premeditated crime. They claim Richard had stalked Polly for weeks prior to the abduction. The state also alleges that in addition to the kidnapping, Davis attempted a lewd act on her. Prosecutors allege that after that lewd act was performed, that Davis killed Polly. On June 18, 1996, Davis was convicted of kidnapping, lewd acts, and first-degree murder. Upon hearing his death sentence, Davis turned to the jury and eerily winked, blew a kiss, and then flipped them off with both hands. In the sentencing proceedings, the presiding judge, after denying Davis to die of lethal injection, said, "It is very easy for me to pronounce this sentence, given your revolting behavior in this courtroom." Davis is currently an inmate of San Quentin State Prison in Marine, just 25 miles from Polly's family home. He continues enact appeals and is locked in solitary confinement after an intentional drug overdose, as well as attacks by other inmates. Winona Ryder, who was an active advocate for Polly's family, dedicated her role as Jo in the feature film Little Women to Polly's life and memory. Because of the tragedy of the lack of communication on the night of Polly's kidnapping, the California Highway Patrol changed the manner in which it broadcast alerts. Whereas before counties had separate systems, Now such alerts as kidnappings are broadcasted statewide on a centralized system. Polly's case also led to the enacting of the Three Strikes Law, which mandates life in prison for lifetime criminals like Davis, convicted of 3 felonies. In honor of her beautiful life and memory, Polly's father, Mark, established the Klaas Kids Foundation, which is dedicated to finding missing children and helping those affected by crimes against children.